Hey everybody, it's Eric from EPAutos.com, your libertarian car guy. Just wanted to go back in time a little bit and remember the world as it was when I was in high school back in the 80s. And in particular, the thought popped into my head earlier today about how before I was old enough to drive, I would walk down to the bottom of the street. And by the way, back in those days, kids generally did that alone, if you can imagine. They didn't get driven down to the bottom of the road by their parents and sit there in their parents' car. That seems to be pretty common today. I see that a lot. You know, it's like the kids aren't apparently able to stand outside and wait for the bus anymore. But hold on to that thought. Anyhow, I would walk down to the end of the street, and my buddy's mom would swing by after a while and pick me up and take me and my buddy off to school and drop us off. And she drove a Beetle. She had I can't remember what year it was, but she had a blue VW Beetle. And we didn't buckle up for safety because in those days you didn't have to, and so there was no worry about some cop hassling you if you didn't do it. And of course the Beetle didn't have airbags. So my point is, it was a very unsafe car by today's safety obsessed standards, and yet here I am nearly 40 years later, able to describe to you all of these things. I didn't die, in other words. I still have all my body parts. I wasn't injured. Essentially, my point is that sure, if you're wearing a seatbelt and you get into an accident, you might not be injured or killed, and maybe the airbag is going to save you. But if you don't get into an accident, these things are irrelevances. Now I know immediately some people are going to say, but how can you, well, you know what, it's entirely possible that tomorrow the Russians might get sick of us prodding them via our proxies in Ukraine and decide to just deal with it by lobbing some nukes our way, right? That could happen. It might happen. So, should I stay inside a fallout shelter all the time because you never know, we might get nuked today? It's a little bit of a hyperbole there, but nonetheless I think the point is fundamentally valid in that my generation, Gen X people and before, we didn't live our lives in fear of some bad thing happening and taking endlessly neurotic precautionary steps because we assumed it was going to happen. We were able to live in a much freer and frankly a much happier time because we weren't constantly belaboring risk and worried about, what might happen. We jumped into cars, literally. There wasn't this business of strapping a kid into a safety seat like there is today. Sometimes I'll sit at a parking lot and I'll watch these poor parents going through that ritual. You have to put the kid in the safety seat, strap him in like a little Hannibal Lecter, and the whole ordeal takes like 5 minutes sometimes for them before they can just get in the car and go somewhere. My generation, we had this just spontaneity. We literally ran out the door, mom, dad are going somewhere, we're going for a ride, and we would literally jump in the car and just roll around. And I know, again, by today's standards, how negligent, how unsafe. We had a great time, wonderful time. We loved driving. Whereas I suspect today that pretty much everybody who's under 30, or a lot of people under 30, were conditioned to regard cars, driving them, and even riding them as some kind of dangerous activity, to be feared, and you better take all sorts of necessary precautions. And again, I'm not trying to swing the pendulum all the way to the opposite side, down to the way of sort of indifferent, reckless activity, but it wasn't reckless. For God's sake, the whole country, the whole world lived that way. If you can imagine it, if you went back to a time when I was in high school in the 80s, there were no airbags in any cars. And most people weren't wearing seatbelts, and cars didn't have ABS and didn't have traction and stability control and driver assistance technology, and somehow there wasn't mass death, mass chaos. Interestingly, fatality rates are up now in our time, notwithstanding all of these safety systems that have come online. Now, my theory about that, my hypothesis to be more accurate, is that this has induced passivity. It has also given people a false idea of how safe a car is. Let me explain a little bit. So back in the day, when I was in high school, we drove cars that didn't have anti-lock brakes. So we maintained a respectable following distance between the car in front of us because we understood that if the guy ahead of us had to stop suddenly, and we didn't have enough room to stop, we're going to skid right into the back end of that car, and we generally didn't want to do that, and so we tended to not tailgate. You know, you can tell that today tailgating is just a common practice, and I think part of the reason it's common is because people have gotten so confident in the ability of cars to stop and to not skid that they think that they can tailgate. And I guess to a certain degree they can, in the sense that the brakes are better and you won't go into a skid, but nonetheless, if you don't have room to stop, you're still going to go into the back end of the car that you're following. Similarly, with regard to things like traction and stability control, back when I was in high school, we learned that we had to control the vehicle. Today, these technologies make a car feel as if it's easier to control, especially at high speed. It's deceptive. You know, you can drive one of these things much higher than your own abilities, and when the technology finally reaches the point of not being able to compensate and the car lets go, you're going to be in real trouble, probably because you're going a lot faster than you would have. You know, when I was in high school and driving some beater little car, and we took a decreasing radius off-ramp, you know, at 5 or 10 miles an hour over whatever the posted limit was, you know, if the car got a little unsettled and started to fishtail and swerve, usually it was recoverable, and even if it wasn't, you weren't going very fast usually. So, you know, you might bend a fender or something like that, but it usually wasn't a major accident. Today it might be a major accident because of the speeds involved. So, you know, on balance, I don't know that things are safer today than they were, and I'll tell you for sure, because I lived it, things were a lot more fun and free before people got obsessed with safety. Anyway, I'm going to have a longer article about this over at epautos.com, which I hope you'll swing by and check out. Also, my latest Wheels Up segment with Bill Meyer should be posted either later today or by tomorrow, Friday at the latest. So thanks as always for viewing, or listening, I should say, and we will have more for you again soon.